There we go. We are having our once a year advisory committee meeting that we need at least once a year to gather as a larger group than just the steering committee, when we bring in our state agency partners as well and talk about our annual plan for the coming year, and thought that it was also just a good opportunity to kind of review where we've gone over the past year. We are a rather big group, so I'm not sure if it makes sense for us to do introductions like verbally around the circle with such a big group of people. But if you haven't yet, put your name and your affiliation in the chat here, and your favorite sweet treat, unless you're broken and you don't like sweet treats. And let's see, has everybody been able to access the agenda and meeting packet that I sent out last week, Wednesday, in the late afternoon? Okay, I see some thumbs up coming around. Okay, just check to make sure I don't have any thumbs down. Is that even an option? Did they allow you to do thumbs down?
Hey, Angie.
Yeah.
This is Jessica Pilarski. I did not get it, but I'm sitting in for Maureen, who's not with us anymore. It might have went to Stephanie. Could you just send that to me quick?
I can send it to you quick. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Let me just stall for time and make little noises while I find it and send it to you. It's coming. It's in the internet. It's out in the air somewhere, traveling rapidly at the speed of light and sound. Okay. Here we go. So since it has been a while since this full group gathered, I thought that it might be nice to just kind of start with a refresher of what we have been doing over the past year, especially for the advisory committee members that haven't been coming to our monthly meetings. And so just to quickly summarize where we have come from and where we are going next. We have the Lower St. Croix Watershed Partnership, which you have all been involved in probably for somewhere around 2 years by now. Some of you since the very beginning, since 2017, some have come on more recently. I'm sorry that there's this gray bar across the top of your screen. I think if I sit still long enough, that might disappear. But when the policy committee was first convening, they set a vision, a mission, and some strategies for what we thought we might do as a group, both during the planning period and once we began implementing the 10-year comprehensive plan. So the vision is the St. Croix River groundwater, lakes, streams, rivers, wetlands, and upland habitat in the Lower St. Croix watershed will sustain healthy ecosystems, recreation, public health, tourism, agriculture, the economy, and quality of life in our communities. And the mission, through the Lower St. Croix One Watershed One Plan process, partners will develop a collaborative and comprehensive plan to guide the protection and restoration of priority natural resources in our region over the next 10 years. So we are 1 year into the 10-year plan. Some of the strategies that we thought this plan would help us to do more fully: to enhance collaboration and consistency between upstream and downstream neighbors, between different levels of government, to identify and address gaps in data technology and implementation funding, to avoid duplication of efforts, and to make efficient use of funding to protect water resources. So I'm sharing that just to kind of, give us the context for the conversation of, what was the intended purpose for this group when we came together. So the specific role that the advisory committee plays is to assist and advise the policy committee and to prepare and develop matters necessary for the policy committee, including but not limited to the annual work plan. So the policy committee will be convening again in January, and we would like to have a recommended work plan for that. And Emily will be talking about that in a moment. But right now we are just ending the first year of a 2.5-year grant from the state through the Watershed-based implementation funding. And for a refresher, we have 10 categories of activities that are being funded through this grant. So this was the first allocation of $1.2 million. It started in April of this year, and it will go until the end of 2023. And as we'll talk about a little bit later, there will be a second round that will begin, they'll be overlapping. So there'll be a second round of funding that will begin later in this year. But the funds were divided up among ag outreach, structural ag implementation, shared services, education, non-structural ag and urban, structural urban, wetland restoration, internal analyses of lakes, lake loading, targeting analyses, in other words, sub-watershed assessments, trying to figure out where pollutant loads are coming from, and then TA and admin. There's a little cross out here because we did just recently shift some of the funds that were previously in the structural urban category into the structural ag category. So they are slightly different than what it was at the beginning of the year. But what have we done so far? Craig, did I get it wrong in terms of my funding, Craig?
No, that's fine, Angeli. The South Washington Water District project actually came in significantly lower than what they anticipated.
Oh, okay.
So Melissa King and Emily Hines, I just met before this meeting, and we are not shifting those funds. I'll go back to the previous slide.
Okay.
So at this point,
so the numbers that I'll show on my slides will be wrong.
yeah. So at this point, we are not recommending shifting funds. The policy committee has approved us shifting funds. We are basically combining activities 2 and 5 budgets. But at this point, we won't shift those funds until future projects come forward.
Okay, so we are back to having 160 and 200.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Jay will talk about this in a little bit, but the first chunk of funds was set aside to hire a basin-wide agronomist or agronomy outreach educator. And we will be entering into a partnership with the University of Minnesota to host an embedded extension educator. And we await hopefully exciting updates in the very near future. But at the moment, funds have not been spent in that category yet because the person has not yet started. We do have 2 structural ag BMPs, which are completed and have used funds from this grant. So this is the one that Craig was telling me is actually cheaper than the price here. There was a very large ravine that was stabilized down in Denmark Township in the South Washington Watershed District. Washington Conservation District had been working with the landowner previously as well. And this will,
how's it going?
And this will save
and everything. So, and a cushion.
Jay.
You may not see me upstairs at all today.
Jay, mute.
I just went up to my car to grab something. I'm going up to the room to work.
Yeah.
Jay, mute.
Hold on. Sorry. I'm not muted.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. I'm at the MASWCD conference and there was nobody here until just now.
So, and I would normally have the controls, I can do it, except I've got the PowerPoint open. So this will save approximately 250 tons per year of sediment. And I think that the phosphorus estimate just got bumped up a little. It had been 250 pounds per year of phosphorus as well. And then a second project that was completed is up in Pine Lake on Pine County on Rock Lake, and it was a cattle exclusion project to keep cattle out of the lake up there. And both the St. Croix River and Rock Lake are priority water bodies listed in the plan. Okay, so shared services educator, that was the second category of funding, and we have one, yay! I will, as soon as I get done with the PowerPoint, maybe just let Barbara introduce herself for anybody in the advisory committee who hasn't met her yet. But Barbara started in May and has been busy all year long doing all sorts of activities on behalf of the partnership. There are a lot of things that are directly related to the partnership: the virtual tour, videos, logo, fact sheets, quarterly newsletter, creating a project flow chart. But she's also been going to community events and field days, working with lake associations, just doing a lot of good stuff out there. So welcome to Barbara. We have not yet spent funds in the non-structural ag and urban category. So nothing has happened there yet. We have not yet spent funds in the structural urban category. Have not yet spent funds in wetlands, and have spent funds in the targeted and prioritization category. And there's going to be a couple of additional ones for the group to review today. One is to update the 3 that have already been approved, are updating the urban and rural sub-watershed protocols, delineating and prioritizing contributing subcatchments for Pine County and the Sunrise River, and completing a tree canopy assessment protocol for enhanced street sweeping. So those are 3 that are already underway, and there's going to be 2 more for the group to review today. And somehow my A7 and A8 got out of order. But I think that Susanna will talk also about this in a little bit and give us an update on the internal analyses. So that is just kind of a quick stop share. Did I stop sharing?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, it's so quiet and everybody's screen is dark that, yeah. So perhaps Barbara, do you want to quickly introduce yourself, since people on the advisory committee have not met you yet, probably?
Yeah, and I think I know most here, but Barbara Heitkamp, really excited to come on board. I live in Bayport, so I am in the watershed, and I was previously at the University of Minnesota St. Anthony Falls Laboratory as both a researcher and a communication specialist. And so just really excited to get plugged into my own watershed, be able to do good work around here, really enjoying meeting all the partners thus far and kind of figuring out ways to get started. Very, very excited to start working with the agronomists when that process concludes. And so we can really hit the ground running on creating this kind of more agronomy-centered education and outreach program. But if I haven't had the opportunity to meet you yet, feel free to contact me at any point. I'm still very much enjoying getting to meet all the players. You're muted, love. Angie, you're muted.
I know, I just couldn't get back to the screen to unmute myself. Took a moment. Okay, so I'm just going to share our agenda just so that everybody can see what we're working off of here, in case you don't have it open in front of you. So then, next up on our agenda, Emily will talk about our cumulative progress toward water quality goals. And do you want me to give you sharing ability right now?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, there you go. You are ready to
Okay,
roll.
thank you. All right, so just kind of presenting the same format that we had at the last policy committee meeting, with just some minor updates, like Angie mentioned, the McQuaid Ravine stabilization, that phosphorus reduction. The final number that we were sent is 251 pounds per year, 3.5 from the cattle exclusion. So a total of just under 255 pounds per year phosphorus reduction achieved so far. And even, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, one of the headlines probably for this first year of implementation is getting our processes established, getting templates in order, and kind of understanding how to go through these processes has been something that a lot of the partners are working on. So just looking at this 2-year reduction goal from our grant work plan, we had a reduction goal of 915 pounds per year of phosphorus. So we're about 28% of the way toward achieving that goal that we had indicated. And like Angie mentioned, that grant will expire at the end of 2023. And then if we look a little bit further out to the 10-year plan, so that approved plan has a total reduction goal for just the target water bodies. So those priority streams and priority lakes. It's a cumulative reduction of 5,500 pounds per year of phosphorus. So we're looking at that 10-year time period, or about 5% of the way. And then this last one, it doesn't look great, but it kind of just illustrates how there's a lot of work ahead of us. And so getting these partnerships and these processes and really targeting cost benefit, high cost benefit practices is so important, because when you look at all of our TMDLs and RAPs and things, for just, again, these priority lakes and streams identified in the plan, 64,000 pounds per year phosphorus reduction needed to get them to state standards. So, and these are just showing those 2 projects that we've approved under the grant so far. Obviously, partners are going to be doing a lot more projects just locally and with other funds. And so we'll be trying to track that as well outside of the grant, just for the plan itself, asking partners over the winter here to be reporting other projects that they've been doing and ways to achieve those overall goals. I think that's all I have for progress update there. Happy to take any questions.
Right, I'm seeing none. Craig, you're up with a financial update. Do you need a screen share also?
No, Angela, I think you did a good job going through the budget. I'll just give a quick synopsis. So I think you guys have mentioned we have a WBIF grant. We're about 7.5 months into the first year of funding. The grant was approved on March 30th by Bowser. It's 1.26 million to date. We have encumbered or spent 43% of those funds. I guess I use the word encumbered there because that's for a lot of the activities like A1, A3, and A10, they're staff time dollars. So the full amount has been encumbered through contracts with partners. So 43% of the funds have been set aside. Currently, 15% of those funds have been spent. The staff time dollars for activities 3 and 10 are through third quarter. The implementation dollars for activity 2, which is the Hinsey and McQuaid projects, are actually current, which is good news there. So we're on track there as far as spending goes. Great news, we've encumbered actually or spent already or received about 75% of our match funds. Thanks a lot to the McQuaid project and then also to the shared services educator position. We have an excess match funds there, so that's great news. We're well on our way on providing the match that we needed. I don't have any other financial things. I think Angie did a really good job going through that with the updates. Unless people have specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Nope. Looks like it. Quiet group. It's a Monday, hey? Sounds like everybody has a case of the Mondays. All right, Emily, I have a memo that you put together to bring to the policy committee in January, and I included that in the packet, and I wondered if you wanted to take a moment to talk about that with the group. It addresses how we are using prioritization and targeting in terms of what will get funded with our current grant funds.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the last policy committee meeting, we talked about some of the projects coming up, and some of the policy committee members expressed some concern about, is it just a first come, first serve process, for funding these projects coming forward? And, you know, shouldn't we be doing some more targeting to make sure only the best projects are coming forward? And so I tried to get some thoughts together with this memo of, first come, first serve might be a bit of an oversimplification. We've got a lot of these gatekeeper criteria in order already. That's, you know, project has to be at least this good to even be considered. And then within that, it's sort of first come, first serve. But the partnership is working on, again, setting up these processes and getting the information to do further prioritization within that top tier category. So again, trying to get only the best projects coming forward with the highest cost benefit, the highest impact to those priority water bodies. So just trying to go through, and certainly there's work yet to be done. It's not perfect, but it's a very large basin. And so, and there's data gaps in some places, and just trying to fill those data gaps. So I think that's kind of the general overview of it. And again, happy to take any questions. And I think the plan was to take this to the January 24th policy committee meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
I just want to say thanks to Emily for pulling all this together. You've been pivotal in the communication process with the policy committee. So thank you.
I was going to echo that same thing. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily. There is a little bullet point right underneath that says leadership for basin-wide projects. So when we put together the current grant, it has administrative funds for a couple of staff people, like Emily or myself, who are doing basin-wide activities. But we can foresee that there are going to be projects like the street sweeping, for example, that will be activities that are happening basin-wide and need to have a lead staff person. And that person might be working outside of what is typically their geographical area. So as we're beginning to think about the next round of grant funding, if there is a project that we're talking about right now that's going to be a basin-wide activity that you think you or your organization would be best suited to be the lead for, just keep that in mind to work with the group as they're putting together the WBIF grant application for the next round, and make sure that funding gets in there to pay for your time if you're doing, project leadership activities, helping program implementation around the basin. Do you want to jump in on that, Craig?
I just want to add, I'm just finalizing the agreement with EOR for the enhanced street sweeping. And it's a good example, both that one and the direct catchment stuff, where Mike Eisenstein is kind of the lead. Where the Chisago SWC is having the contract with the consultant, in this case EOR, but the day-to-day technical type work assistance is through Mike Eisenstein. So I just think that's a good example of one where, for future reference, if there's something we're going to be doing and you feel you can be the lead person. Thank you.
Okay, so then the next thing is the annual plan of work in 2021 progress report. So that's back to you, Emily.
Sure. So this annual plan of work is expanding beyond just our watershed-based implementation funding grant, and it covers all of the implementation line items in the 10-year plan. So there's 60 plus implementation line items there. We've got 10 activities in our grant work plan. So basically the annual plan of work is just a reflection of table 5-1 in the 10-year plan, just simplified a little bit to show for what we're expecting for 2022. And so that's what we have in front of the advisory committee for an action today, because it says in the 10-year plan that annually the advisory committee will prepare the annual plan of work. And that'll go to the policy committee in January as well. Yeah, I think any questions on that? Anything else to add, Angie?
I don't think so. This is one that since we're recommending it to the policy committee, I have a note on here to do an actual vote on this to make sure. Barb Peichel says, assume you were going to walk through it. But this is one that that we want to get, you know, an actual vote of approval from everyone before it goes to the policy committee in January.
Angie, I just want to clarify to the group that this annual plan, you know, for the first year, we talked the annual plan, it was WBIF funding annual plan. And there became a little confusion, I believe, by the policy committee when we're working on modifications because of the way our joint powers agreement's written. So we need to make sure this group is clear on that. We need to have an annual plan, like Emily said, that talks about table 5.1 coming from our Lower St. Croix watershed plan. And then within that, we'll have subset of plans. In this case, we'll have a WBIF work plan that's completely separate from the annual plan. So I just want to make sure the group, when they start thinking annual plan, it's not the WBIF work plan anymore. It's the annual plan that's part of this overall joint powers agreement.
Okay, did you want to walk through, Emily, since it sounds like at least a couple of people would like for you to?
Yeah. So again, it looks a lot like table 5-1 from the 10-year plan, just simplified a little bit. So every item that had a number in that 10-year plan, and actually maybe I could just flash that quick. So here's table 5-1 on this screen. It's got kind of general implementation actions, and then here's actual numbered line items 1 through 66. And so I took those numbered items. They've got a priority location and a measurable output. And so basically just tried to simplify that. So it's in the 10-year plan, it's for 2 years. So what the planning team talked about and are recommending is just splitting it 50-50 for the purposes of the annual plan of work. So 150 acres in 21, 150 in 22. Just for simplification purposes, it might be, you know, different in the end. And then we'll report that when it comes to the annual reporting process. And I'll just note here too, so the way that the 10-year plan is set up is for some of these sections, it's got implementation actions that aren't associated with these individual line items. So you'll have to refer back to this plan because they kind of cover multiples. And then further down, some of them do have their own implementation actions. So, and then maybe I'll just also note here too is each one, so the priority location, Craig and I just met with Melissa King this morning to talk about potentially, you know, what can the partnership do to make it easier for partners to understand, am I in this priority location? Because this is, you know, for understanding if my project applies to line item 1 here, I've got to know what the DWISMA vulnerability is, the pollution sensitivity to wells. And even if you turn on that pollution sensitivity layer, you got to know it's high or very high, and ignore the medium or low. So we're kind of looking into ways that we can make it easier for partners to understand this priority location element of it. But yeah, it's basically a very big table. It's got 4 parts, part A, B, C, D, and it goes down to 66 line items.
So
go ahead.
well, I was just going to say that what Emily is showing right now, this Excel spreadsheet I sent to everybody last week, along with the agenda for today's meeting, if you're rifling through your papers, trying to figure out where this is. And the full plan is on the website. So when she's referring to this being very similar to the table 5-1 from the full plan, you can find that on the Lower St. Croix website.
Thanks, that's helpful. One question I had was where it says year 1, I know that's how it is in your implementation table, but we're at the end of 2021 right now. So did any of those things need to shift, or are you just trying to be true to the table? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Was it actually 150 acres in 2021?
I think that gets to the next point, which was that we haven't, it's the plan for the year-end progress reporting, and you can speak to, Emily, but you know, most people aren't doing their reporting on what they did for the previous year until the spring. And so we thought it's a little premature now to be able to gather all the data from everybody to know how much progress we made toward everything yet. That's an answer that we'll have probably around, you know, April.
And maybe I'll just add to that, so partners, a heads up that we'll be asking, it's kind of like a crowdsourced reporting we'll need to know. And that gets back to the GIS thing that we're working on, trying to give you tools to help you give us the information, reporting what has been done in this big wide basin in 2021.
Okay.
So it's really just like, here's what the table and the plan said, and we're just kind of saying that's what it is. You're not saying you're really gonna prioritize a couple of the items over the other. It'll depend on the funding source, right? You're just kind of saying, here's our table and here's where we want to go, and hopefully partners will get there. There's one thing that I haven't heard, like I haven't heard any groundwater type projects being brought up. And like when we're looking at phosphorus goals, that's all very lake and stream set, you know, lake centered. So I know that was a major issue you guys had. So I don't know if people are planning to bring projects forward, or what are you going to really focus? And maybe there's other funding sources for different things. I guess I don't know. So it's more like just blessing the table from the plan once again is what you're asking the AC to do.
Yes. And to answer what I think you're asking, Barb, but there are a number of activities that are in the 10-year plan that were not fundable by the WBIF grant. And those are activities that people are doing either on their own, with local funding, with federal funding, with some other kind of state funding that's not the WBIF grant. And that is the information that we have not yet crowdsourced to get from everybody to know, you know, what progress has been made, you know, because I can say, for example, in Washington County, the county and the conservation district have been doing a number of groundwater related efforts. But those, you know, we haven't reported it out, so it wouldn't be showing up in the table yet. It's just, you know, it's a little challenging this year when we're, even though we are nearing the end of the first year of implementation, we don't yet, you know, people typically aren't reporting out on their annual progress on things when it's still early December. Yes, and Jay also says that a lot of the groundwater non-structural ag BMPs will be ramping up once the agronomist is in place. We did have a conversation within the planning team, Barb, about how as we get further into plan implementation, things might start to be more focused on some activities than others. I mean, right now we're still so early that basically everything that's a goal is still a goal. And it's possible that, you know, we might end up 7 years down the line and we're doing really good on some of the goals and some of them we're still behind, and then we might shift our focus a little bit. But right now I think we're early enough that pretty much everything that's a goal is still a goal. Okay, so this is the tricky part where when we have been doing voting for specific projects to get funding, I've been doing a roll call vote, and that's been just with the steering committee. And now we are folding in the advisory committee as well. Let me ask the group, do you want me to do a roll call vote on this, or do you want me to ask for everybody to put a little thumbs up if you are supportive of what we are proposing to be the annual plan for 2022? I see a thumbs up coming from Craig, from Mike, from Jay, from Jamie, from John, Angela. Yeah, I'm looking around. If you have concerns, please either unmute yourself and share, or I don't know if you can do a thumbs down, or you can chat, or you can write in the chat and say nay, nay, I say nay. I'll keep looking to see if there's any nays, any horses. Are there horses in the crowd? It's beginning to feel a lot like Monday. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and propose this to the policy committee in January.
Thank you, everybody. Nice work.
Angie, thank you, everybody, too. But just a quick question to Melissa and Barb. Any other questions or concerns from Bowser staff as far as us proposing this type of an annual plan?
No, we just know in your comprehensive watershed management plan, you say you're going to do an annual plan, but we don't really have guidance or specifics about how you're going to do that. So unless Melissa, you had any comments, but I'm glad, I mean, and it's going to help you because eventually we're doing an assessment process on all of these comprehensive watershed management plans. And like when you guys do your 5-year check-in, like how are you doing? So I think you guys are setting yourselves up very well to answer that question by having an annual plan that reflects their plan and say, how are we doing?
Okay, that's good to hear.
One more thing from my perspective now, so just for the group, if you're one of the joint powers members, this will come to the policy committee in January. If they approve it with a 2/3 vote, then you need to put it on your agenda in February, your meeting agendas, because ultimately it goes back to the governing boards of the JPA and needs a 2/3 vote there to be approved as our annual plan for fiscal year 2022. And we'd like to have that back by 5 weeks after the PC meeting, if I remember correctly.
Yep, and the January meeting, I believe, is January 24th.
So we're hoping everybody can have that because it's on the 24th. That gives you time to get on your agendas for your meeting in February, so we can have that information back by March 1st. And Jamie's going to be revisiting the JPC versus JPE. Jamie Sherburne is at the January 24th PC meeting also, so we'll be revisiting that at that time. To answer Barb's question. I hope Jamie's aware of that.
Yeah, did we hold him to do that?
I recall that's how it worked, yes.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
Okay, so I guess we have reached the point where we will be doing subcommittee updates. And Jay, are you able to give your subcommittee update right now? About
Angie, can we just back up? We didn't hit the last bullet under item 5. I don't.
Oh, yes. Homework for partners to review your 2022 workload and consider possible requests for WBIF funding. As you noted when I went through the update at the beginning of this meeting, there are quite a few categories where we have not yet spent funds. So please be thinking of projects. And we've had a conversation as a planning team as well about developing kind of an encumbrance-like process for if you think you have a project that might be a good one to use the money on, to just go ahead and ask up front so that we can predict where funds need to be reserved for later in the year. Do you want to add to that at all, Craig or Jay?
No, I think that's good. I just, if you, like I say, if you have a project that you're a little reluctant on or don't want to wait to the very end, contact the appropriate subcommittee lead. What we'd be looking at is kind of a 10% type design type of thing, where just here's a good project, here's a projected pollution reduction numbers, here's a projected budget. We can bring that forward as an encumbrance type for 6 months and hold on to that money there for you, so you can get that project hopefully moving forward, work with the landlord to get it going. So, any additional, Jay?
No, I think that is just one of the methods that we're going to be using to make sure that we're not doing first come, first serve, and we don't have like a panic rush at the end of the year to spend money.
Matt Moore, got a question?
Where are we bringing these forward to?
To whoever is the subcommittee lead for the appropriate funding category.
Okay,
So timing wise is it would go to your subcommittee, and then a week prior to the steering committee, the information would then be forwarded to the steering committee for review and approval, and then it would go to the Chisago SWCD board.
do we have a count on projects right now?
Currently, we have 2 projects that have come forward. Both have been approved and finalized. We have no pending projects. Jay, just to clarify, to me, the encumbrance process, we wouldn't have to go back to my board at that point.
Oh,
I'd be
correct.
fine
Yep,
with the
sorry.
steering committee, just
Yep.
making that recommendation. We put a placeholder in there at the staff level. And then at a future time, if that project gets finalized and comes forward, we go to my board.
Yep, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so Craig, I just sent you a couple of emails, but we're planning on having phase 2 truck ready to go next summer.
Awesome.
Yep, so I think that'd be good, Matt. Get us I did see the first email you sent. You know, if you can throw together a budget, some pollution reduction numbers, just some beginning stuff, we could bring that forward to the steering committee as a project. What you're looking at total budget, what you're looking at for proposed cost share assistance, other partner match type of things, just some preliminary stuff, and then we can go to subcommittee meeting with that one.
Yeah, I don't remember I don't know if we have a cost estimate for a rough one, but we're probably in that Great River Greening's got 360,000, I think. Quote me on the number, and then I think we're in that $500,000 mark.
Yeah, like I say, just Matt, just put some of that stuff down. I can work with you on it. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Perfect example.
Yeah, and for those of you who are familiar with the state cost share policy manual, that's kind of the guidelines that we're going to be using for funding allocation.
Tiffany, I'd encourage your staff too. They had some questions on wetland stuff. I'd encourage them to reach out to Becky Wozni over at ACD if they're interested in moving forward with some of these encumbrance set aside dollars.
Just so you know, I disagree with state cost share. This isn't state cost share, so we don't have to follow those guidelines.
No, that's a good comment, Matt. We're not exactly following the guidelines, but from the encumbrance to allocation and payment, it's similar to that, but we're not formally adopting the state cost share guidelines.
Correct.
Yeah, this is watershed implementation funds, and if we have projects, we should fund them.
Yes, we're not looking at the percentage match or anything like that as far as those guidelines are concerned.
And
That's everything I have, Andrew. Thank you.
Construction engineering needs to be included as part of construction.
Matt, unfortunately, current E-Link work plan does not allow us to include that under activity 2 or 5, but we could look at including that under activity 9. So that'd be a separate activity item.
Okay, Jay, I think it is your turn to update us on the agronomist.
Excellent. This is going to be one of the advantages of this collaborative approach, because I'm going to hand it over to Joel because he hasn't had a chance to talk to this group.
Okay.
And I'd love for Joel to introduce himself a little bit and then talk about the status of the Lower St. Croix Partnership Embedded Extension Agent position. Joel?
Great. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Jay. Well, and I think was I on this group last time you all met? Maybe it was very.
I think it was just the steering committee. So there are a few new people from the state agencies that are members of the advisory committee, but not steering committee.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Yep, so I think I know many folks, but if not, my name is Joel Larson. I'm the Associate Director at the University of Minnesota Water Resources Center. In that role, I lead the Extension Water Resources team. which has extension educators across the state that work on a range of water-related issues, ranging from urban stormwater management to groundwater and drinking water, to agriculture and rural watersheds and everything in between. And what that team does is really try to connect and keep tabs on research that's happening at the university that might help us address a lot of our water resource challenges in Minnesota, and then get that information out to folks that might need to use it across the state. We also go the other direction in working with our partners to identify what those research needs are, and kind of feeding that back into the work that the research teams are doing here at the university, whether that's at the Water Resources Center or elsewhere at the U. So was the background for the conversations that Jay and others and I have had over the last few months to get this joint extension educator outreach specialist set up. We've been working with a great team to interview applicants, and we're kind of now in the final stages of being able to make an offer for someone. And once we have that offer set up, we can, of course, make that announcement. There's going to be, of course, a little bit of a waiting period until we get that person on board. But once we do, I'm sure that they will be coming to some of these conversations and meeting with many of you all as they are looking to develop their educational programs, as well as the activities that they're going to be managing to help get some of these conservation practices across the lower St. Croix landscape. I'm happy to answer any questions about the broader program. I can certainly try to answer questions about the specific position and where we are in that process. And I think I will then open it or leave it there for now.
I gotta say, Barbara, don't ever play poker, man. You look like you're just ready to burst and say something.
Barbara does not have a poker face. We know that.
You haven't truly tried me. I can do a poker face when you need me to do a poker face. But
We don't believe you,
I'm very
Barbara.
excited for this person to get on board.
Yes, we are too.
Yeah, eventually on board would be, yeah, that would be nice.
Do you hope if all goes well, you'll be able to make an announcement still this month, sometime this calendar year?
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah. We've been running the hiring process and HR piece alongside and parallel to the formal agreement. And so right now, actually, that HR process has leapt a little bit ahead of the agreement, but Jay and I are talking actually right after this meeting to see if we can't finalize the rest of those pieces.
Okay. And Jay, just for you know, Melissa, Emily, and I met this morning, and we have the draft language that you submitted for the language change to the WBIF work plan for activity 1, and Emily will be submitting that information prior to this person being hired or starting.
So we had a question in the chat about where will this person be located. That is still subject to negotiation at this point. The Washington Conservation District has been planning to host the position. And yes, Matt, we will be providing IT, probably.
Yep. But their workload will be all across the basin. So they'll likely be out and about for much of their time. It's a good question, Margaret.
Great, thanks. I'm also very excited. Thanks for the update.
Okay, so there was
Joel,
no
see you
grant
at 10:30.
announcements. I have to admit, I was like, oh, I was so hoping that this morning it would be like, and the person is. No. We'll keep waiting. Okay. Alrighty then. I guess the Craig, Mel, and Mike Eisensee are up to share updates from the Urban and Agricultural Projects Mega Committee.
I think we've discussed this pretty well already from previous agenda items. We did just want to touch base on Clean Water Fund grants. So if you wouldn't mind, if you have a Clean Water Fund grant, maybe raise your hand or something and just share what that information is. We can kind of, look at doing this. 'Cause at the end of the day, if it's a good project, that, well, obviously it's a good project that was funded. We want to report that also through this program. So I'll turn it over to Matt Moore, who has his hand up first. Matt,
There you are.
go.
You mean a clean water project for next year?
A
No,
Clean
we
Water
just
Fund
wanted to
grant
know if anybody
application.
got Clean Water Fund grants.
Oh, you mean for this year?
Yeah,
Correct.
Well, we did the McQuaid project, so that that project turned out really well. It came in considerably under budget, and I think it was back in August of last year, there was that area of the St. Croix Valley experienced a pretty good storm with quite a bit of rain. I think it was in the 4 or 5 inch range, and the ravine itself became probably twice its size. So we were able to get in there and get it done, and came in under budget, and it's good.
awesome.
Thanks, Matt. I guess what we're just want to clarify. I'm looking for, if you're receiving an FY22 Clean Water Fund grant from Bowser, that they'll be awarding this month now. Emily, I know you guys have some. Do you want to go from there?
Yeah, I can go next.
No, we haven't gotten any clean water funds for 2022.
Thanks, Matt.
I can go next. Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District is slated to receive 2 2022 Clean Water Fund grants. One is the target water body is Forest Lake. It is a wetland restoration in the Washington Judicial Ditch 6 subwatershed. And so that'll result in a phosphorus reduction of Forest Lake. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what that was. I think on the order of 40 or plus pounds per year. And then the other one was for Moody Lake in Chisago County, doing just the remaining, we're calling them the capstone projects, to achieve just that remaining, it's like 10 or 20% watershed phosphorus loading. We've already achieved 80 or more % of that with existing projects. And now it's just kind of cleaning up the remaining ones that we have identified in the direct drainage area.
Thank you. Paul, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, Pinus WCD is going to be receiving a clean water grant. It's not in the Lower St. Croix. It's in the northern part of our county, but for Island Lake, series of projects, they had a dysfunctional outlet for a few years, and so we kind of had hands off until that outlet was fixed. Now we have a kind of a stack of projects on that lake, so we applied for a grant. We're getting that. So it's in the Kettle River watershed, so not in the Lower St. Croix, but should eventually help the St. Croix River. So that's what I got.
Congratulations, Paul. I bet that's your first Clean Water Fund grant for you.
Yeah.
as a manager.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Good job.
And like you said, it's in the larger St. Croix, so it still benefits all of us ultimately. I think I saw Jay's hand next.
Thank you, Angie. Congrats to everybody. Washington County did it really, really well this round. And so I would say kudos to everyone. Washington Conservation District did apply for 1 grant for restoration work on Perro Creek in Bayport in Middle St. Croix WMO. And I'd like to hand it off to Matt to talk a little bit more about the details because he knows a lot more about the project than I do.
Yeah, I was just pulling it up in E-Link here to refresh my memory. So WCD applied on behalf of Middle St. Croix because I needed a break from all these dang Clean Water Fund grants that Mike kept getting while he was here. Looking at it's just a $80,000 grant to install up to 4 structural BMPs in the city of Bayport to reduce 8 pounds of phosphorus and 4,000 pounds of sediment a year. And hopefully actually looking at implementation this next year if we can get in and get out quick. So
Very cool. All right, Mike Eisenseed, who gets all the dang grants.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, so we received 2 grants for Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District, which was great news. These have been projects that have been on the docket for half a decade or longer. And we've finally got to the point of development with them where we could get funded. So the first one is on Big Marine Lake, which is directly connected to the St. Croix River through the Carnelian flowage. And that's working in the Bliss edition. The district did a study with the city of Scandia 4 years ago now, looking at drainage and water quality improvement areas. It's the largest and most dense urban area on Big Marine Lake. The majority is kind of shoreline residential and then rural. So we'll be moving forward with a lot of low impact development retrofits in that area. I'm anticipating that we'll be working on design in 2022 and construction in 2023. And then the other grant we received is for a water quality retrofit for a portion of Big Carnelian Lake, which is also on the Carnelian flowage and directly discharges to the St. Croix. Big Carnelian is currently experiencing, it's a high quality lake, but it has both declining trends in clarity as well as increasing phosphorus over the last decade. And it's nearly impaired for aquatic life per the NPCA's new standards, looking at fish IBI and shoreline habitat quality. So our 10-year management plan, which is just getting wrapped up, identifies a large number of projects on there, but this one is by far the largest. And so we'll be routing about 40 acres of drainage that's flowing into the lake, because the area was developed before stormwater management was really a practice, and into a large infiltration and filtration basin. So those are the projects that we got.
Very cool. Anybody else?
I just want to say, for those of you that maybe didn't work pre-Clean Water Fund, Matt Downing, just an $80,000 grant is still a really good sized grant. So I'm impressed. Congrats, everyone.
It's just not the $500,000 one that Mike set me up to get before that. So it seems small.
They are, but like I say, pre-Clean Water Fund grant, we would have been thrilled to have an $80,000 grant for something.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's everything I have, Angie, under 8, 2, 4, and 5. Mike, do you have anything you want to add?
Nothing to add, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. The next up on the agenda is Miss Barbara talking about watershed education updates.
All right, so we've got a couple different things going on. Craig and I chatted last week, so we wanted to get some kind of ag-related outreach items kind of moving, just so when the agronomists did come on board, we already have kind of a couple things front-loaded to plug that person into and to kind of get things going. So we're doing a small acreage and large acreage related workshops. With the state of the pandemic, we had really hoped to be able to do these things in person, but it's becoming clear that that probably isn't the best case. So what we're going to do is we're going to push back large acreage. We were kind of hoping for kind of late February for that. And so we're probably going to look a little bit more into March and just hoping that the landscape is a little bit more amenable to doing some things in person. Because a lot of the small acreage landowners are generally might be a bit more skewing younger, and we're gonna actually try and do a virtual kind of webinar kind of networking meeting, and so I'm still going to aim to do that late January. So we've kind of identified what we hope the flow of the day is going to look like, and then being able to start promote that a bit later this month and heavily as we move into January. Other than that, being able to identify, because there's a lot of professional development going on right now for farmers. They, like so many folks, know that this is the time of year to get, to get those folks' attention. So looking at other related organizations and events that we could potentially plug into and start gaining some visibility as well. Beyond ag stuff, Angie and I are starting to look at being able to plan some sort of public officials event. At least we're doing one kind of in the southern part of the watershed and then one in the northern part of the watershed. We're looking at a couple wineries or some microbreweries, just trying to create an event that's, you know, exciting to be able to come to, and planning that for late spring or summertime to be able to have that. And that's where we're just trying to bring folks in. We're going to be talking about mids. We're going to be talking about just being able to get these folks together and kind of talking as a group of people. And then I'm also working on a lake storage stewardship guide, and I think I've been in contact with most of the LSC partners about this. And so we've had a member from a lake association really just hammer home the point of just like, we want to be able to provide something to our lakeshore owners about how to be good stewards, you know, of this part. And it's a very comprehensive guide. We found that there are several other Minnesota counties that have put together a similar guide. And so being able to essentially take that template of what they've done and modify it for our own needs. And so just talking with partners about whether such an exercise makes sense, whether they want to do it a countywide edition or a watershed district-wide version. But I actually just received the template this morning from the graphic designer who helped with the last iteration of the guide. And I'm going to see how easy it is to modify, and then just start working with the partners on how involved they potentially want to get in this process. So just good conversations. And then I think that's it relative to Lower St. Croix. Obviously, the other part of my job is working with Angie on NREP related initiatives. And so we have lots of ongoing conversations there as well in terms of what 2022 is going to look like.
Yeah. And just to mention, when Barbara was talking about those workshops with the local leaders, many of you are familiar in the past, have attended our workshops on the water when we've taken local leaders out on the St. Croix River on a boat. And for the past 2 years, because of the ongoing global pandemic, we've not been able to do that. So God willing, we will be able to do that in 2022. But I don't know, I've given up holding my breath because I'm getting tired of being proven wrong.
Yes.
So hopefully we will have at least 2 workshops, one that would be on the water leaving out of Hudson or Stillwater as we have in the past, and then one that is up in the northern watershed on the land, somewhere on the land. Okay, let's see. So then we are on to wetlands. Our wetlands group is Becky on. Becky. I'm not.
Jamie.
Jamie, are you Becky today?
Sort of. I'm just going to defer and say that Becky's not available. So let's move along.
Okay. Well, then I will move along to Susanna, who I know has been getting proposals from people. So have some kind of update.
Right. Yes, I do have some updates. But just to review the Activity 7 internal analyses, there is $50,000 in funding available to calculate internal loading of phosphorus estimated at 2 lakes at $25,000 each. So we anticipate work will be completed by a consultant, and there are 2 steps to the application process. And one is the call for projects, and that was due on October 31st. And then the next, the application, which is due just this Wednesday, December 15th. And so with the call for projects, the subcommittee had received interest for 7 lakes: Martin and Typo Lakes, Anoka Conservation District, Little, North and South Goose, and East and West Rush Lakes in Chisago County, and then Forest Lakes, of course, in Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. And so the subcommittee, they had recommended 4 lakes as the top tier lakes to move forward with the application process, and then receive the consultant quote. And those are for Forest Lake, Martin and Typo, and West Rush Lakes, as those lakes may rank higher based on the selection criteria that the subcommittee put together in terms of external loading of phosphorus, addressability, finance, future treatments as well. And then the subcommittee recommended another tier of lakes to apply for the funding, but their applications may not be funded this year, but may perhaps in the next 2-year work plan. Those are for Little Lake, East Rush Lake, and then both North and South Goose Lakes. And so we still have some time to receive applications. Our deadline is the 15th, but then after that, it's just gathering the subcommittee again to review all of the applications. And so hopefully by the next steering committee meeting, we'll have lakes to recommend for funding for the studies. And that's all I have.
That sounds good. All right, so in the very near future, it sounds like we will have internal analyses projects to get updated on. All right, so then we are on to our last update category, and this is the one where we have 2 actual projects to consider for WBIF funding. I have down here that Mike Eisensee is giving the updates, but I just saw that Jay unmuted himself. So perhaps Jay is the one giving the updates and I listed the wrong person.
Nope, that's fine. Mike is the actual applicant for one of the 2 SWAs we have going to the steering committee today, but I just wanted to give just a big picture update on the other activities that have been approved for funding. As you mentioned earlier on, the 8 subcommittee and the steering committee and the Chisago board approved funding to update the prioritization protocol work. That work will be happening over this winter. So that work is on the agenda for both the Chisago SWCD Washington Conservation District and Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District have received funding to help hold together that updated protocol. I did get an update from Blaine this past week that he has the diagnostic monitoring protocol piece is nearing completion. So that will be integrated into our overall prioritization protocol and be tied into the sub-watershed analysis portion of the protocol. We also approved funding to do catchment prioritization in primarily the Sunrise River and Pine County area, because we have very little data for identifying contributing catchments. And so that work is going to be underway this winter as well. And then Mike also spearheaded the charge on starting a prioritization process for the targeted street sweeping efforts that we're going to be undertaking. And that's happening this winter into next spring too. So we can get that process updated and then reach out to our communities. We will be having some additional outreach and education to a lot of our partners about some of these programs that will be moving forward, so everybody is aware of what's going on. I think that's it. So then we have 2 SWA proposals to conduct some watershed analyses. As part of the application process, we have both an application form and an eligibility form that everybody who's applying for these dollars needs to complete. Angie sent out the application and eligibility form and background project information for both of the subwatershed analyses that are proposed right now. One is from Carnelian Marine Sanctuary Watershed District for direct drainage and spring streams, and the other is for the Rock Lake SWA. The Rock Lake SWA one, actually, we had our meeting last week and we decided to pull that one from the agenda. So that one we're going to table till the next steering committee. So if Mike is still here, I can walk through the SWA. No, Mike's here. So Mike, I'm going to hand it off to you then if you want to pitch this for steering committee approval.
Sure, I can provide a quick overview. Angie, could you give me the ability to share screen?
I sure can. Great question, Barb. Assume you just want steering committee members to vote. I think so, because that's what we've done for the previous projects.
Okay, can everybody see my screen, big map? I will assume so. So So for 30 years, the Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District has focused a majority of its priorities in the lakes region and has had really good results with that area. We're just completing our 10-year management plan. We've shifted that now that we have solid data and management strategies for all of our lakes, and we're really working on the eastern side of the district now for the next decade, looking at the areas directly contributing to the St. Croix River. So that's overland drainage as well as 21 streams, 3 of which are designated trout streams. Those streams are highlighted in this map in the kind of the magenta or violet color. And then as part of that effort, knowing that this is a really complex region as far as drainage, we went through a process of updating drainage areas for our XP swim model and identifying those areas that are contributing and non-contributing, which the non-contributing areas, which are, I would define them not as 100% landlocked, because during the 100-year event, those will contribute, but they're not acute contributors. So, somewhere at the 20-year event, these areas, some of these areas may actually have like or may have an acute contribution, but chronically, consistently year to year, like on a dry year like we had last year, they wouldn't contribute at all. And even on wet years, they'd only partially contribute, if contributing at all. So those areas that we identified in red, we're proposing to not include as part of our assessment evaluation. And then the other thing that we completed in this area, which we did district-wide, was a pollutant hotspot analysis. And so that hotspot analysis is going to guide our targeting for areas to look at as far as field visits, and then as well as where we're probably going to be implementing BMPs. So overall, it's a pretty large area, 27 square miles, all directly contributing to the St. Croix River. And in the proposal, we've provided a summary of the work plan. It didn't quite come out in the packet, so I just reformatted it here in the spreadsheet so you could get an idea of where the time's going. Because we've already done a lot of the work for the modeling and delineation with hotspot analysis and our XP swim update, we don't really have to spend any time on that. So we're going to dive right into doing desktop analysis, and that includes looking at contributing catchment areas and looking back at historical aerial photos, looking for high intensity land uses within wetland areas. I didn't provide the wetland layer, but there are a lot of wetlands throughout this area as well. So that will help us target wetlands to field visit and potentially soil sample or monitor in the future for prioritization for restoration. And then part of the other 2 pieces of that desktop analysis include identifying areas for non-structural and structural practices to evaluate in the field. So once we're completed with that, we essentially have maps that guide our field investigations, as well as a large mailing list. So we have to, of course, mail and notify landowners that we're going to be out on the site and give them plenty of opportunity to contact us to tell us that they don't want us visiting the site without them and scheduling site visits, etc. And so after that process is complete, then we'll be doing the field investigations for about 240 hours. And that's detailed there. And then the third step then is, after we've identified potential practices, then we do the cost analysis based on our findings out in the field, what metrics work, as well as more detailed modeling of the catchment areas to those practices and pollutant load reduction potentials. And then all of that gets put together in a final report, which will be essentially a guide for us moving forward over this next decade as we're working with landowners, both targeting our outreach and our cost share for implementing BMPs and potentially future Clean Water Fund or Lower St. Croix applications to help fund the highest priority projects in that area. And then with that, I'll open it up if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mike.
This is Craig.
Sorry, go ahead, Craig.
What's your proposed budget request for the WBIF funds?
We are requesting $20,000.
Oh, I got it wrong. I thought you were requesting the full 40.
Nope, the district has budgeted $20,000 for this activity in 2022.
Yep, if you look at the application form, it does note the benefits and then also the cost, and the funding request. And the eligibility form that is also included notes the criteria, and all of the this project meets all of the eligibility criteria for the application.
From the fiscal administrative side of things, is for the group. This activity A8 has a budget of $150,000. To date, we've encumbered or spent about $43,272, leaving us a little over $106,000 remaining in this budget. Of that, we do have $40,000 of it earmarked for enhanced street sweeping budgets. We did have $15,000 as a placeholder for the St. Croix direct drainage Washington County portion assessment study.
So Mike, Jerry has a question I think I can answer quick. Jerry, the areas highlighted in red, Mike, are those the non-contributing areas?
That's correct.
So those areas, Jerry, don't drain to the St. Croix River and are not included in this. Under normal circumstances, are not acute drainage issues, so are not included in this SWA. Got it. I also want to note too that the A8 subcommittee has reviewed this and is recommending approval.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the group? I just typed in the chat the list of, I realize that it is confusing with us having all of these different, one moment. With us having all of these different committees to keep track of them. So I did post into the chat the list of who all of the organizations are that are signatories on the Joint Powers Agreement. Each one of those entities gets a vote on the steering committee. And those are also the entities that have representation at the policy committee. And then when we convene this advisory committee, then there are additionally state agencies that are here to provide advice and questions, but don't get a vote on the actual project spending. Okay, so are there any other questions from the group before we go ahead and do a roll call vote?
Just 2 comments on my end. As a fiscal agent, I do support this. It fits in the budget. And secondly, Mike and Angie, if this is approved today, my board meets this Wednesday. I did put this as a placeholder in my board packet, so I will need the information from you no later than 3 o'clock tomorrow. Got everything to pull together for my board.
Okay. All right, I'm going to, for these projects, we've been going ahead and doing a roll call vote. So I'm gonna call out the organizations and whoever is here on behalf of that organization, if you could speak up with a yay or a nay. I'm starting with Anoka, SWCD.
So Becky is absent, and since I'll be voting on behalf of the Sunrise River WMO, I think that is a no vote on that. Or, that is, she's not present.
Okay, I will do an absent. Okay, then do we have Karen from Browns Creek?
Yay.
Yay. Okay, Mike, I assume you say yay.
I may be biased, so I think it's best to recuse myself from this vote.
As a fiscal agent, honestly, as fiscal agent, guys, I would prefer to have votes. I mean, so Jamie and Mike, I would be happy if you guys voted if you're representing your organizations. We don't have anything in language that says you can't. So
okay, then yay.
Yay. Chisago County. Susanna.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, Chisago Lid.
Yes.
Okay, Chisago SWCD.
Yes.
Comfort Lake Forest Lake.
Yes.
Okay, Isani County. Do we have Derek on? Okay, not here. We do have Tiffany though, right? From Isani SWCD.
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes. Okay. Middle St. Croix, Matt.
Aye.
All right. Pine County. Do we have Pine County on? Okay, we've got Paul from Pine SWCD though.
Yes.
Yes, okay. South Washington, Matt.
Aye.
All right. Jamie, you said you're voting on behalf of Sunrise then.
It's a yes.
Okay. Do we have a Valley Branch? Okay. Jay for Washington Conservation District.
Yay.
Yay. And then Jessica for Washington County.
Yes.
Okay. So we have 4 absent, but it's still enough to carry because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, might be good for advisory committee members to see the application and scoring criteria at a future meeting. I assume that's something that the A8 subcommittee put together or looked at when you were discussing these projects.
The eligibility form is the detail that in terms of the scoring, there is no scoring per se. It doesn't meet the minimum eligibility for funding. It was also listed in the work plan. And it also, the application form lists the priority water bodies that it's going to. So you have the materials that were used.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding. Yeah, so Barb, in terms of the sub-watershed analyses, we're approaching that differently than the, so-called in the ground projects. That it's basically just, were these already identified as a priority activity in the plan? If so, yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think the point is that, and I know you probably won't meet with AC members until next year, but I think the policy committee too is interested in like, how are you using that criteria you developed for the different categories that you're funding, that you're moving projects forward. People have to go through quite a bit of work to even propose a project for some of the different categories, especially where there's pollution reductions. And so the more you can share, like, here's what someone has to, do for the different, like, this is a little bit different than the projects, right? But just to kind of understand that process, because it's not like just someone's pulling something together. I mean, this obviously meet, as Jay said, eligibility and priority water bodies and those kind of things. Because I think you guys take that all for granted, and when you're not part of that process, the subcommittee process, then you don't know that.
Okay, sure, yes.
And can somebody summarize what she just said? Because I couldn't understand any of it. If anybody.
The point was that the group developed scoring criteria for projects that would be funded through WBIF funding, and the subcommittees are looking at that scoring criteria when determining whether or not to recommend a project to the steering committee. And so making sure that we share that information when we're coming to the steering committee or the policy committee and saying, this is the scoring criteria and this is why this project scored well. Of course, this project that we're considering today is not a physical in the ground project. It's a targeting and prioritization project. And so those ones are not, we're not using the scoring criteria because that was only for physical in the ground projects. So this one, that's why we're not using that table, but for the ones that we are, Barb is just encouraging us to make sure that we share that information when those projects are moving forward, I think.
Thank you. Sorry, technology is fun. And I guess, yes, I agree with Barb because I've made that comment in steering committee meeting. So thanks, Barb.
Okay. That is all that I have on the agenda for today, unless anybody wants to unmute and sing Christmas songs together. Barbara looked happy. Everybody else continued to look like a blank square with their name on it. Jay looks happy also.
I would like Craig to sing for us.
Oh, and that answers my question as to if you can make a thumbs down. I didn't think you
You
could.
can. There are lots of ways to do that. There's thumbs downs.
Craig
There's.
proved that you can
Yeah.
make a thumbs down.
I think we should vote, and if we have a 2/3 majority, he has to do it.
I gotta run. I got our next meeting.
Okay, so our policy committee will be meeting on January 24th. The next time that the steering committee is scheduled to be meeting is on the 26th. So that's actually after the policy committee meets. But if you have projects and you're wanting to do them, be in touch with your subcommittee leads. And carry on with your Mondays.
And kudos to everybody for ending exactly at 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.